Somebody once asked me to quickly say my facts. Threes! I said no sweat, I know.
May 5th. Today we are going to be doing some more with our geometry, but today we're going over angles and their different types. We're going to go over the 3 types today, and then we'll get to measuring a little later on in the week. Your word problem of the week is going to continue with the angle MNP. It's the one that I started with you yesterday. I'm going to complete those 2 boxes that hopefully you went through, and then you can continue on with your journey today. Today, you are going to complete the activity for your Achieve article, The Team Pilot Breaks World Record. Yesterday, I read it aloud. Today is going to be that activity time to be using those notes, annotating those questions, and getting a little deeper into the different skills and main ideas of that article. Then, of course, read on Epic or AR, and I read aloud chapter 7 from Harry Potter. It's a shorter chapter, so I'm doing 1 today. And then finally, power writing with day 15.
You see, first up is 3 times 1, which is 3. That's an easy one, so what's next? Are you ready to start? Well, next you double and it's really no trouble. 3 times 2 makes 6 big bubbles. 3 times
All right,
3
welcome to today. For math, we are doing page 34 for angles. You're going to see this page in your packet. It's not going to have that Tuesday math. That's kind of what I do to show you online for Google Classroom, but you are going to be looking for this 4G1 and angles, and that will lead you right where you need to be. Also, that page 34, that's in that small bottom right-hand corner. Over here, of course, you can click this link here, and it will take you to the Google Classroom or directly to the form if you're not going through the classroom. Either one will work, of course. All right, so before we start with vocab, I'm going to play this song to kind of activate your memory, and then we'll get started.
Between 0 and 90, an angle is acute. This angle's small and skinny and kinda cute. It looks like a V or the top of a Y, or the angles that you see eating pizza or pie.
Angles are measured in degrees, and here's how to remember them with ease.
See, when an angle measures 90, do we call it right? You can tell this angle just by sight. It looks like an L or the corner of a square. You're looking at them when you're walking up the stairs.
Angles are measured in degrees, and here's how to remember them with ease.
From 90 to 180, an angle is obtuse. This angle's kinda fat, it's got a big caboose. Like the hands on the clock when it's 1:45, or the antlers on the head of a full-grown moose.
Angles are measured in degrees, and here's how to remember them with ease.
To measure an angle's degrees with a protractor. Place the vertex at the hole in the center. Line up one ray at 0 on the protractor. Remember that the 0 can be on top or under. Count up to where the other ray points at the number. That will be the angle's measure.
Angles are measured in degrees, and here's how to remember them with ease.
Alrighty, so let's get started with our vocabulary for angles. It's going to be new and different as we have not covered this. So angles, I want you to remember this is the exact same card you saw in class on the walls, and it's going to go over what you need to represent it when you're writing it. So it has, this is how you write the name of an angle. So it's that angle sign, if you remember. It looks like that, compare those alligators. Yes, it does, but you're going to use that, and you're always going to have it facing this way towards those letters, and then you are going to use the letters. If you remember in class, that middle letter and the order of your letters matter. So if you see it's A, B, C, and you remember when we did stuff in class that you can't just say B, A, C. That would be a completely different angle. That little middle letter is that measure of the angle that you're focused on and measuring, that middle point. Because remember, 2 rays come together at a point which is a vertex, and that vertex is that letter that's in the middle, or that point in the middle. So your order of your letters matter. Be cognizant of it. So if you did CBA, that would be completely fine. ABC, completely fine. That's that same angle because you're measuring this small acute angle. So you need to just logically follow and think when you're doing it. Follow with your pencil like we used to in class, and everything will be a-okay. I just want to make sure you guys know from the very, very, very beginning, when we're not practicing specifically, that those letters do matter and to be careful with them from day one. Now, the official definition is the joining of two different rays sharing a common vertex. So a ray, remember, is a point and a line that goes on and on forever. So two rays mean you have a point and a line that goes on and on forever. The point they share and a line that goes on and on forever. And where those two rays come together at that point is where you're measuring that angle, where you're putting that protractor and getting that degree measure. So once you do that and you line up your protractor, you get it on the vertex and you measure, then you can start defining what those angles are. The first way you can define it is if it's less than 90, then you have an acute angle. Acute, some of you would joke in class. I remember Ramiro saying often like, oh, it's a little cute. So it's little. It's something that's cute. You would kind of think, oh, it's something little and cute. Yes, of course. Any of those things that help trigger that memory, perfect. Apply it. But if you want to know the technical term, it's an angle with a measurement less than 90. So as long as it is less than that right angle, a 90 degree, you are in an acute angle. Now, a right angle is an angle formed by perpendicular lines measuring 90 degrees. So that means that you have two of your rays coming together at a vertex, and they come together right at 90 degrees. And if you remember, it is very different from any other angle because you know it's a right angle because you have a box here. So you're going to see this box-like shape on the angle, and that's another way to know, oh, that's a 90-degree angle. It comes right at 90 degrees. It's not greater than, it's not less than, it is 90 degrees. Right angle. And then if an angle with a measure is greater than 90, but less than 180, then you know it's obtuse. So that means that your two rays come together at your vertex, and you have this one is 146. Yep, it's greater than 90. It's greater than what I would have right here with a right angle, but it's not more than a straight angle, which is 180. It's in that in-between portion that makes it obtuse. All right, so what we want to practice is now identifying them within these kind of models with multiple rays, multiple lines, and you're kind of seeing the angles within them. So I want to show you what I mean first and then give you a chance to find the second one, kind of like yesterday. So it says highlight the right angles. So, I'll let you do it first. See, I'm even meaner. I'm not even going to show you. I'm going to allow you to go in and do it, because I know this is review, so I'm confident you'll be able to find it. So go ahead in and find a right angle. And when you find that right angle, make sure you use that box to signify where that right angle is. Pause now and go ahead. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you found one right angle. If this wasn't the right angle you found, do not take out your eraser because we have one more to go over. So we have one more left. If this was the one you found, find one more. If this wasn't the one you found, please make sure you write this one down and keep the one you first found. And let's see in about a second if we were right. Bingo. Here are two. We have two right angles, and you see this box, and that shows you that they are right angles. They are 90 degrees. This line here won't do it. If you look here, that line and that curve, you're going to be a little greater than. So you're going to have an obtuse angle here. And this one looks a little small. You might have an acute. It's not going to be that sharp kind of square-like shape, rectangle-like shape that you get that L and you get your 90 degrees. All right, so now the same goes for this one. You're going to highlight the acute angles. All right, here's the first one. You have an acute angle, and I know that there is at least one more. There's actually multiple, but I'll only do two for each to kind of just give you that launching board and have you to know and check yourself. So the second one is going to be right about there. And there are other ones you can find. I know for sure right here isn't one because this is a right angle. Right here looks like a good acute angle. Where else? I'm sure you're yelling them out at me and I can't hear you, which makes me so sad. But there are multiple, but just kind of be aware and see those ones that are less than 90 degrees. Oh, see, I did do it. Go, Miss Princell. Clap it up. Woohoo. All right, and our final one is obtuse angle, which is greater than 90, but not over 180, which is a straight angle. So go ahead and try to find them. First one I found, right here with our obtuse angle, and you see it's going to be a little greater than that line would be if it was a right angle. You would kind of see where my mouse is going up and down, so it's a little bit greater than that. Greater than 90, which makes it obtuse. Let's see if you can find another one. Go ahead and pause. All right, welcome back. And this one will also work. It's a little greater than if you had your 90 degrees.
See, first up is 3 times 1, which is 3. That's an easy one, so what's next? Are you ready to start? Well, next you double and it's really no trouble. 3 times 2 makes
All right, now we're at our problem of the week. So for number 4, which is week 4, we have the same one from yesterday, and then you can click here if you're doing it online. Let's get started. All right, so for problem of the week number 4, we have the angle MNP measures 110 degrees and angle MNO measures 80 degrees. Determine the measure of angle ONP. Explain how you know your answer is correct and how you determine your answer. Show your work below. So yesterday we committed to going in and finding those important numbers and questions, and I kind of told you that I would go over those today. So I'm going to do that for you now, kind of showing you the thinking process and how you would pull them through, and hopefully did yesterday. So for the important numbers, I'm going to start annotating and reading through my problem, meaning that I'm going to start at the beginning and I'm going to annotate as I go and as I come across important numbers. So as I read, angle MNP measures 110 degrees. Bing, I stop myself and go, okay, I need to pull out the important stuff. I know 110 degrees, but what am I talking about? I am talking about angle MNP, and it measures 110 degrees. So I'm going to write in my box, angle MNP is 110 degrees. That is my first important number idea that I need to solve this problem. No, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to keep going and read all the way to the end of my problem. So as I read, it says, and angle MNO measures 80 degrees. That's another important one. Am I just going to pull 80 degrees? I'm not just going to pull 80 degrees. I'm going to know that I need to put MNO measures 80 degrees. So I have both these angle measures, and I have the name of that angle, which is important because look at all these letters over here. I need to make sense of what I'm talking about, what I'm working with. And how am I going to do that? I have to know which angles and which numbers go with which angles. So that being said, I have both that down, and I'm going to keep moving. Now, I know there's no more numbers left in here. I now know that the end says determine the measure of angle ONP, explain how you know your answer is correct, and how you determine your answer. That sounds a lot about what I'm trying to solve. But now my job is to pull out what I am exactly trying to solve. So, what I am trying to solve is determine the measure of ONP. I want to be specific with you right now because I could write in determine the measure of angle OMP, explain how you know your answer is correct, and how you determine your answer. I want to hold back on that because I get way overwhelmed personally. My brain really has to focus on one step of what I am solving at a time. Am I going to have to explain it? Okay, yes. Am I going to have to say how I determine my answer? Yes. But what is all of that leaning on? What is that entire Jenga tower of what my answer is determined based on? And what it's determined on is everything I need to describe is the measure of ONP. I have to be laser focused on finding ONP before I can go on past that gray line that I underlined. I'm not going to be able to explain. I'm not going to be able to determine how I got my answer or show my work if I can't answer this simple question. Determine the measure of angle ONP. So for now, personally, I'm going to keep that in this box, not overwhelm it with a bunch of writing, and focus on this question as I'm moving forward. All right, and now it is your turn for today's work to go ahead and try to get down an equation that you're going to use to help you find your angle of ONP and the sentence to answer this question. And as we've used in the last 3 weeks, you're doing that race strategy of restating the question. So we know that our question above was determine the measure of angle ONP. So now you're turning that into an answer. And how would you phrase that? You're going to take out that kind of questioning words and answer it in a complete sentence. And you're setting it up with that blank because right now you might not know the answer, but you can set it up to know. So you have that navigational tool. It's kind of your flashlight to keep you steady and straight on finding your answer. Good luck, guys. I hope this is helpful, kind of breaking it down. And remember from last week, I kind of did a twist and turn of being like, you know what, I'm going to do my drawing first. So if today that's how it floats to you, that you kind of want to go down to the model or that, know the flexibility is there. The idea is that we're just kind of working through these problems in pieces so that we're really diving deep. It's not so much that you have to do this exact box. Just you do what feels right and what gets you closer to the answer.
Text features, ooh na na. We use them when we read nonfiction, ooh na na. They help us understand the meaning, na na na. We've got to listen to our teacher and look for the text features. Text features. Oh, table of contents helps us locate the major topics. Glossaries give us definitions of the key terms.
All right, guys, the reading for today is going to be our activity for the Teen Pilot Breaks the World Record. If you need some help kind of rereading and going back into that article, if it's a little difficult for you, make sure that you go back to yesterday's video. I do read it aloud, and even though if it's at a different level, if you're doing it online, it should give you kind of a basis and a foundation to move forward with it. I know the questions today are really based on cause and effect, so just make sure you're aware of that skill of, like that example I show you all the time in class of like, water knocks over. The cause to that effect was Miss Princell knocking that water over. You need to go back into that article and figure out where those blocks, that Jenga tower falls, and what led to the fall. So please annotate, try your very best, send over some questions if you have them. We are all here for you.
The major topics. Glossaries give us definitions of the key terms. The index gives us the location of detailed topics. These print features help to organize the entire text. Illustrations and print features, graphic aids and
Our writing today is number
organizational
15,
components.
and your prompt is the baby dragon. So this really leaves your writing up to you. Today is a pretty open one that you can go in really any direction you want. Realistic, you can put it like you have a baby dragon right now next to you, or you can go into a fictional world if you want, throw a baby dragon into your Fortnite game or Minecraft or Roblox or whatever floats your boat. But make that baby dragon somewhere in your story and you are golden for today's prompt. Get creative, guys. Chapter 8, The Potions Master. There, look. Where? Next to the tall kid with the red hair, wearing the glasses. Do you see his face? Did you see his scar? Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory the next day. People lining up outside classrooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or doubled back to pass him in the corridors again. Staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the portraits, kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armors would walk. The ghosts didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right direction, but Peeves, the poltergeist, was worth 2 locked doors and a trick staircase if you met him. When you were late for class, he would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up behind you, invisible, grab your nose and screech, "Got your conch!" Even worse than Peeves, if that was possible, was the caretaker, Argus Flinch. Harry and Ron managed to get on the wrong side of him on their very first morning. Flitch found them trying to force their way through a door that unluckily turned out to be an entrance to the out-of-bounds corridor on the 3rd floor. He wouldn't believe they were lost, was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose, and was threatened to lock them in the dungeons when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Filch owned a cat called Miss Norris, a scrawny, dust-colored creature with bulging lamp-like eyes, just like Filch. She patrolled the corridors alone, break a rule in front of her, put just one toe out of the line, and she'd whisk off for Filch, who appeared wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the secret passageways of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as suddenly as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to give Miss Norris a good kick. And then, once you had managed to find them, there were the classes themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of different stars and the movements of the planets. 3 times a week, they went out to the greenhouse behind the castle to study herbology with a dumpy little witch called Professor Sprout, where they learned how to take care of all strange plants and fungi and found out what they were used for. Easily, the most boring class was History of Magic, which was the only one taught by a ghost. Professor Bitz had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up the next morning to teach. Leaving his body behind, Binns droned on and on while they scribbled down names and dates, got Emmerich the Evil and Uric the Oddball mixed up. Professor Filtwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of their first class, he took the roll call, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think she wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever, she gave them a talking to the moment they sat down in her first class. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she said. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. Then she changed her desk into a pig and back again. They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing the furniture into animals for a long time. After taking a lot of complicated notes, they were given a match and started trying to turn it into a needle. By the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone all silver and pointy and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone had been really looking forward to was Defense Against the Dark Arts, but Quirrell's lessons turned out to be a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strong of garlic, which everyone saw was a ward off a vampire he'd met in Romania, and was afraid would be coming back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of some troublesome zombie. But they weren't sure they believed this story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Quirrell had fought off the zombie, Quirrell went pink and started talking about the weather. For another, they had noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from Muggle families like him, hadn't had any idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What have we got today?" Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge. "Double potions with the Slytherins," said Ron. "Snape's head of Slytherin House. They say he always favors them. We'll be able to see if it's true." "Wish McGonagall favored us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor House, but it hadn't stopped her from giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then the mail arrived. Harry had gotten used to this by now. It had given a bit of a shock on the first morning, when about 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the great hall during breakfast, circling the tables until they saw their owners, dropping letters and packages onto their laps. Hedwig hadn't brought Harry anything so far. She sometimes flew in to nibble his ear and have a bit of a toast before going off to sleep in the owlery with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. It said in a very untidy scrawl, "Dear Harry, I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would you like to come and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I want to hear all about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hedwig. Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's quill, scribbled "Yes, please. See you later" on the back of the note, and sent Hedwig off again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potions lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the start of the term banquet, Harry had forgotten the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potions lesson, he knew he'd been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. Potions lessons took place down in one of the dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle, and would have been quite creepy enough without the pickled animals floating in glass jars all around the walls. Snape, like Fitwig, started the class by taking the roll call, and like Fitwig, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter, our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling their names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty and made you think of dark tunnels. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent without effort. "As there is little foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the soft, simmering cauldron, with its simmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." More silence followed his little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape suddenly, "what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Powdered root of what to an infusion of what?" Harry glanced at Ron, who looked as stumped as he was. Hermione's hand shot up into the air. I don't know, sir," said Harry. Snape's lip curled into a sneer. "Tut, tut, flame clearly isn't everything." He ignored Hermione's hands. "Let's try again, Potter. Where would you look if I told you to find me a Biozar?" Hermione stretched her hand as high into the air as it would go without her leaving her seat. But Harry didn't have the faintest idea what a Biozar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe, or Goyle, who were shaking with laughter. I don't know, sir." "Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming? Eh, Potter?" Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had looked through his book at the Dursleys, but did Snape expect him to remember everything in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching towards the dungeon ceiling. I don't know, said Harry quietly. I think Hermione does, though. Why don't you try her? A few people laughed. Harry caught Seamus's eye, and Seamus winked. Snape, however, was not pleased. Sit down, he snapped at Hermione. For your information, Potter, Acidel and Wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the Draught of Living Death. A Biozar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat, and it will save you from most poisons. As the monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plant, which also goes by the name alknite. Well, why aren't you all copying this down? There was a sudden rummaging for quarrels and parchment. Over the noise, Snape said, and a point will be taken from Gryffindor. House for your cheek, Potter. Things didn't improve for the Gryffindors as the potion lesson continued. Snape put them all into pairs and set them to mixing up a simple potion to cure boils. He swept around in his long black cloak, watching them weigh dried nettles and crush snake fangs, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to like. He was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy had stewed his horn slugs when clouds of acid green smoke and a loud hissing filled the dungeon. Neville had somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron into a twisted blob, and their potion was steeping across the stone floor, burning holes in people's shoes. Within seconds, the whole class was standing on their stools, while Neville, who had been drenched in the potion when the cauldron collapsed, moaned in pain as angry red boils sprang up all over his arm and leg. Idiot boy, snarled Snape, clearing the spilled potions away with one wave of his wand. I suppose you added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire. Neville whimpered as boils started to pop up all over his nose. Take him to the hospital wing, Snape spat at Seamus. Then he rounded on Harry and Ron, who had been working next to Neville. You, Potter! Why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Thought he'd make you look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor. This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked behind their cauldron. Don't push it, he muttered. I've heard Snape can turn very nasty. As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind was racing and spirits were low. He'd lost 2 points for Gryffindor in this very first week. Why did Snape hate him so much? Cheer up, said Ron. Snape's always taking points off Fred and George. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you? At 2:55, they left the castle and made their way across the grounds. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of galoshes were outside the front door. When Harry knocked, they heard a frantic scrabbling from inside, and several booming barks. Then Hagrid's voice rang, singing, Back, Fang, back! Hagrid's big, hairy face appeared in the crack as he pulled the door open. Hang on, he said. Back, Fang! He let them in, struggling to keep a hold of the collar of an enormous black boarhound. There was only one room inside. Hams and pheasants were hanging from the ceilings, a copper kettle was boiling on the open fire, and in the corner stood a massive bed with a patchwork quilt over it. Make yourselves at home, said Hagrid, letting go of Fang, who bounded straight at Ron and started licking his ear. Like Hagrid, Fang was clearly not as fierce as he looked. This is Ron, Harry told Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water into a large teapot and putting rock cakes onto a plate. Another Weasley, eh? Said Hagrid, glancing at Ron's freckles. I spent half me life chasing your twin brothers away from the forest. The rock cakes were shapeless lumps with raisins that almost broke their teeth. But Harry and Ron pretended to be enjoying them as they told Hagrid all about their first lesson. Fang rested his head on Harry's knee and drooled all over his robe. Harry and Ron were delighted to hear Hagrid call Fitch that old git. And as for that cat, Miss Norris, I'd like to introduce her to Fang sometime. Do you know every time I go up to your school, she follows me everywhere? Can't get rid of her. Filch puts her up to it. Harry told Hagrid about Snape's lesson. Hagrid, like Ron, told Harry not to worry about it. that Snape liked hardly any of the students, but he seemed to really hate me. Rubbish, said Hagrid. Why should he? Yet Harry couldn't help think that Hagrid didn't quite meet his eye when he said that. How's your brother Charlie? Hagrid asked Ron. I liked him a lot. Great with animals. Harry wondered if Hagrid had changed the subject on purpose. While Ron told Hagrid all about Charlie's work with dragons, Harry picked up a piece of paper that was lying on the table under the tea cozy. It was a cutting from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts break-in latest. Investigation continue in the break-in at Gringotts on 31st of July. Widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins told today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied the same day. But we're not telling you what was in there, so keep your noses out if you've got what's good for you, said a Gringotts spokesperson. Harry remembered Ron telling him on the train that someone had tried to rob Gringotts, but Ron hadn't mentioned the date. Hagrid, said Harry, that Gringotts break happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while we were there. There was no doubt about it. Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eye this time. He grunted and offered him another rock cake. Harry read that story again. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied earlier that same day. Hagrid had emptied Vault 713, if you could call it emptying, taking out that grubby little package. Had that been what the thieves were looking for? As Harry and Ron walked back to the castle for dinner, their pockets weighed down with rock cakes, as they'd been too polite to refuse. Harry thought that none of the lessons he'd had so far had given him as much to think about as tea with Hagrid. Had Hagrid collected that package just in time? Where was it now? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry?